And now Jesus Christ is thinking about you all over again. On this Palm Sunday night, the first day of Holy Week, He's hoping for you, as He is for me, that we will not mark these festivals as hollow days on a calendar, just sort of traditions, that kind of come and go again. The text says that too, doesn't it? He died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for Him who died for them and was raised again. He died in a completely exceptional way, I repeat, all for you. He also died in order to create a completely new kind of life inside of you and me. I think we all would have to admit that one big trademark of life in our particular time and place is a terrible kind of self-centeredness. There's no nice way to talk about this, I'm afraid. In our Canada, in 2011, it is quite understandable that people, and we have to include ourselves in this in so many occasions, are self-absorbed. And in one way, you can explain that, can't you? Because we've got more money than just about anybody else in the world. And in a city like ours, there is absolutely no end of things to do. Shopping malls to be scoured, and hockey games and other athletic events to be attended, movies to be seen, cool restaurants to be sampled by the hundreds. There's a whole world just waiting to be explored at the touch of your fingertips on the internet. And we've got tanning salons that can make it look like you spent the winter in Florida, even if you never left town. We've actually come to the point, brothers and sisters, where it's not only possible to live for yourself, we've come to the point where it looks like the smart thing that reasonable men and women are going to want to do. You'd have to be a fool to see it any other way, people think. And now tonight, into all of this self-centeredness of ours, steps the great Lord of Holy Week. He's not trying to change you by threatening or scolding anything, but He's coming at you with a cross. And long before He was ever nailed to it, Jesus Christ foretold the effect that His cross could have on people. He said, when I'm lifted up from the earth, in other words, when I'm nailed up high on that cross of mine, that's when I'll draw all people to myself. And that has literally come true, hasn't it? Because what is it really about Jesus that lays hold of your heart and mind and makes you want to come to Him? Is it just the fact that He's rather wise and insightful? Is it only the truth that He knew how to out-argue His enemies and He always had an answer real quick for anybody who tried to trip Him up? Is it merely all those touching tales that He fed hungry people and comforted the sorrowing and brought healing to some of those who were sick? Is it merely the fact that Jesus knows how to give you really practical advice that can work even now in perfectly everyday situations? That's not really it. It's the fact that He was willing to die for you, that He was willing to take the whole penalty so that you could take a pardon letter home with you, that He took the whips and the spear and the nails so that you in exchange would get God's total acceptance and love. That's what Peter said. Christ died, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. And this is exactly what He does even today in the lives of millions of people by the message of His holy cross. He brings you to God. He doesn't have to force you at all. But with that bleeding face of His and those perforated hands, He's inviting you and letting you know that you are more than welcome to come. You have to ask yourself, after all, who else ever loved you and is always going to be there to love you the way that He does? Who else ever gave his life for you and can lay a claim on you the way that He can? Who else is able to give you life? And I mean real life, deep life, the kind of life that keeps on going when this life is all over and done with, the way that He's able to do. He died for you so that your whole life now could be completely focused on Him, completely directed to Him, completely oriented toward Him, because you've become completely convinced that the real treasures of life are going to come from Him, and because you realize that He alone can teach you the difference between what matters and what doesn't matter. That's the difference between living self-centered and living Christ-centered. He died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. And boy, while we're on the subject, that's another great thing about Holy Week, the wonderful great thing that we're all going to celebrate next Sunday when Easter dawns with its gladness once again. To think that the one who died thinking about you and your need is now alive again. And that's the reason that Christians don't have to just operate like the members of some sort of a memorial society who have meetings and try to keep the words and the influence of some dead hero alive on the basis of their own power. This thing is the other way around completely. The one who loved you on his cross is now alive and active and working on you at this moment. That's why we're told at the beginning of the book of Acts that everything that Jesus did and said until the day he was ascended to heaven was only what he began to do and to teach. That means that he's still doing and still teaching, even in our midst at this very moment. Anything today that gets learned in the church or heard in the church that's worthwhile to be taught ultimately is coming from him. Any comfort that really soothes people on the inside originates with Jesus. And any encouragement or great heroic deed, even if it's performed by a human being, ultimately had its beginning with Jesus. And St. Paul tells us in his letter to the Galatians exactly how it went in his own experience. He said, you know something? I've been crucified with Christ, and the result is that I'm no longer doing the living, but now Christ is living in me. So whatever good thinking or acting or speaking is happening, he's the one doing it. Now, I would like to tell you, I think this helps big time. When you think, for example, about the relationships that you have with loved ones or friends or members of the congregation where you hold membership, tempting as it is, please do not look at those folks anymore with just your own eyes. How I like them or don't like them, or how they make me feel good, or how I've decided in a couple of extreme cases that they rub me the wrong way. You put on the eyeglasses of Christ, who wants to do his living through you. And once you've got those eyeglasses on real firmly, you begin to ask, now how does Jesus see this person? How can Jesus bring his help or his comfort or maybe even his correction to bear on that person? And how maybe could he make use of me to get that done? Or think very especially at this moment of people around you every day who don't know Christ and don't confess Christ. They might be people who live in your neighborhood, or maybe a relative, or maybe somebody you work with. The one who died for you also did it so that in those relationships you won't just live for yourself, but for this one who died for you and was raised again. You look at those people through his eyeglasses, and you'll begin to see them for what they really are. They are dear, dear people that God's Son loves and wants very badly. How can you nudge them a little bit closer to him? I don't know the answer in the specific cases that you're dealing with right now, and maybe you'll scratch your head and say you don't know the answer in those cases either. Maybe you can say something to them about Christ. Or maybe you feel that the mood or the moment isn't quite right. Well, I'll tell you something. At least then you could pray that God would open the door to create the right moment and to give you the eyes to recognize the right moment when it comes. And maybe in the meantime, you could find a way to display the love of Christ a little bit more clearly in your temperament and in your actions, so that the whole idea of being his follower would really be attractive to that person. The brother pastors here, join me in asking God to give every one of you a blessed, blessed Holy Week. But far, far more than that, we're begging the Lord to plant inside of you this blessed Holy Week kind of life, this new life that sprouts and grows when we're not satisfied just to mark a few festivals on the calendar, but instead do something that, by the way, you don't have to go to Denmark to do, and that is, in heart and spirit, to bow really, really low and to move in really close and to peer up really trustingly into the face of this one who pleads, still tonight, come unto me. He died for all, so that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again.